Hi YouTube, Ryan from Emissary Studios here, and welcome to my first instructional video. Today we're taking a deep dive into the new preset pack for STL Tonehub that was based on a guitar amp that was built for me back in 2014 by Ignite Amps, the Emissary. While many of you know the Emissary as the quintessential free plugin for crushing guitar tones, a lot of you don't realise that it's actually a physical amp that you can order and have built for you. It was one of these heads that was meticulously captured by Paolo Campitelli of Warlord Sound Studio in Italy. First up, a quick demo of how it sounds in a mix, followed by a deep dive into how I would approach getting a great guitar tone using this new preset pack. Enjoy. Okay, so for this demonstration, we're going to be using a brand new song from my death metal band, Gaped. I've just stripped it back to just the drums, bass, rhythm guitars, and lead guitars, so that we can just focus on getting some sick guitar tone. So I've already gone ahead and mixed the drums and bass. So I've just used Toontrack Easy Mix for that. So there's just some really super easy presets in that just let me set and forget. And then I don't have to worry about kind of playing around with that too much and losing the creative flow. So by themselves, the bass and the drums sound like this. So neither the drums or the bass on this album are actually real. The drums are Superior Drummer 3 with the new Mark Lewis Death pack, and the bass is Submission Audio Eurobass 2, I believe. So getting into the guitars. So this is one of the reasons that I actually like amp simulators over real guitar amps sometimes, which is, a fairly controversial opinion in this day and age, but the reason that I like doing that is I can actually group the left and the right tracks together in Logic into one of these summing stacks, so I can now pull the tone on both of those at the same time and listen to the way that actually interacts with the drums and the bass. So it allows me the freedom to get the tone perfect without needing to think about how it might change later on when I combine it with the drums and the bass. So let's just call that guitars. So those together, they were just recorded DI. So the guitars were just my Ibanez Prestige 7-string into a Little Labs Red Eye 3D Phantom, I think it's called, just into a Focusrite Claret 4 pre. So now on my group bus, so I'll collapse the drum and bass groups down just to get them out of the way. Now on my mixer here, I'll go STL Tonehub, stereo. So now that tone's actually affecting the left and the right channels at the same time with a single instance of the plugin. So in the top right here, I'll just make that a little bit bigger. I'll change the routing here to stereo. So if that were in mono, it would just sum both of those guitar parts together in the center, and that's not what we want. So we go stereo. Now, we are here for the Emissary today. So looking at that. Now it is a 2-channel amp, so it does have a clean channel, but this is death metal, so that's not really too useful for us for this particular demonstration. Maybe I'll cover that another time, who knows. So hitting this Notes tab here, we're just looking at lead channel presets. So to start ourselves off, I'll usually just drag that down, start with the first preset, and then press play on it, increase the volume until I feel that it's sitting with the drums and the bass. And I would mix that a little bit louder as well, just so that I can hear the tonal character of each preset. So from here, I'll just cycle through each of the presets and have a little bit of a listen to a few seconds of each one, and then eventually I'll come across one that I'll find just sits better in the mix. So I do have all of these other controls that are here, but usually when I'm using any sort of preset-based software like this, I prefer to just get the overall character of it first, and then I'll just tweak it from there, because the way that this system works is that you can't actually change the cabinet, but you can change certain things like where the microphone placements are, but not change the actual cabinet itself. And you'll hear as we cycle through these as well that even though they were all made using the exact same amplifier, the exact same head, the difference that the cab and microphone combinations make is massive. It's huge. So there were 3 cabinets used in the creation of this pack as far as I can tell. So there's a Mesa Boogie oversized 4x12. I'm assuming that the ST is the stiletto cab. And then down here there's a Marshall 1960A. So without further ado, let's start from the beginning and cycle through some presets. So that's all of the lead channel presets. So out of all of those, I quite enjoyed this Damage Done one, but overall I think I'll go with this one called Green Tower. That just kind of ticks more boxes for me, I think. I like for my tones to have enough sort of clarity and note definition that you can still hear what's actually being played. Like I don't want to go for, you know, a kind of crazy converged nail style HM2 sound. Like I do like my tones to be clear but yet still thick enough to be effective for death metal. So from here, I'll then go through and actually tweak each of the units. So the Stomp section, it's basically just overdrive pedals that you'd put in front of an amp. I haven't found much of a use for the compression section for high gain tones for obvious reasons. But this overdrive 1, which I would go ahead and assume is just a basic tube screamer, like an 808 or a TS9. So normally I wouldn't run anything on drive, just because I find that just makes it a little bit excessively saturated, but for some amps that would be necessary. And then the tone section, So turning it down makes it sound a bit woollier, and then turning it up just gives it a little bit more brightness. So that one sounds good to me. I don't have any issues with that. So from here, I'll then just basically go through each one of these settings and sweep the full range of it, and then find something that I think suits it. So we might just go back to the beginning where those palm mutes were. I find that sections like that are usually a really good gauge of picking the gain, just because the held notes decay a little bit too quickly when there's not enough. Sounds pretty good to me. So EQ wise, I also found that, it already sounds quite close to how I would have it, but we'll check it anyway. Usually when checking mid-range and really just EQing in general, I really try to make an effort to not look at the dials and not look at the numbers and values there, and just try and trust my ears when I'm doing this, because I realise that that's a bit of an esoteric bullshit way of doing things, because if you don't know what you're listening for, then you can't trust your ears. But I usually just find that sweet spot in it where it just seems to blend in correctly, at least to my ears anyway. So as you can kind of see, there's not really that much movement from the 12 o'clock point for all of these to sound great, because the preset that I picked already had 90% of the tonal balancing done, because these were profiled off setups that the engineer that put them together thought sounded great. Then there doesn't really need to be too much work done to it. So we've also got these bias and sag controls here that I don't normally touch the bias one. I don't think that I'm confident enough in my ability with it to be able to know exactly what it's doing. But with the sag control, to my understanding, is basically just the way that the power amp reacts. So to my ears, the sag control basically just gives a slight little dip when you hit down hard. So I assume that it's something to do with the power amp. I find that it tends to take the edge off. So I'll usually run that, maybe at 10. Just for the exercise. So we'll see how that sounds with the palm mutes here. Yeah, so it just seems to take a little bit of the edge off it. So next up is the 3D cabinet mixer. So this one is pretty much exactly where everything starts to really fall into place. So normally when I'm checking this, the way that I would know that it's going in the right direction is that it starts to lose some of the top end fizz. So we'll just solo the guitars and you can hear how substantial the difference is when you move this around. So that's quite a difference. So from here, I'll listen to it in context as I did before, and then find where I think that the top end fizz is getting a little bit overwhelming, and then just back it off from there to a point that I feel like it's sitting a lot better. About there seems right to me. So from there, there's another few controls that you can play with. So distance is as self-explanatory, so it just decides how far away the microphone is from the speaker. So that we can hear the difference that that makes here. Then the angle, which goes up to 45 degrees, so the actual angle that the microphone is facing at the speaker. And then resonance is to do with the power amp, I believe, but I don't usually play around with that. I find that it gives a little bit too much harshness. So the difference that I seem to notice with the distance knob is that it seems to affect where the mid-range sits in the tone. So listening to it in context. So just sort of in the high mids, like around those really harsh areas, around 3 to 4K, it seems to just take the edge off that and tame it, because the less that you have to do in post, the less that you need to EQ out of this, the cleaner the tone's going to sound, because you're not screwing with the phase of everything by having to carve out all of these unruly frequencies. So the closer it is to mix ready, the better, really. So now we'll see if there's any difference we want to make with the angle. Yeah, it's already quite close. So then the last thing is that we've got some filters here. So anyone that's mixed high gain guitars before knows that there is a lot of just junk in the low frequencies. So there's rumble that's there that's just chewing up headroom that is not useful to your tone at all. So and then I would use the low pass filter to get rid of the hiss in the high end. So I would just drag that down until I start to notice it affecting the tone. So let's just set that at 10K. All right, so then we move on to the equalizer section. So this has just got basic high pass and low pass filters, which we've already covered with the cabinet, so we don't really need to worry about touching those. Then we've got a low shelf. We've got two different frequencies that we can boost or cut, and then we've got a high shelf at the end of the chain. So the only things we're going to worry about is just the high mid and low mid control here. So I don't usually worry about touching the Q. I try not to get too picky with these things because you can just drive yourself insane. So P1 goes from 10 Hertz all the way up to 4K. So I'll use that for the low mids. And then P2 goes from 1K all the way up to 22. So we'll use that for the high mids. So normally when I'm pulling guitar tones, I find that around the 3.5K mark is kind of where the harshness seems to sit. It's kind of a known thing that 4K is the enemy, but I usually find that it's just slightly lower than that at 3.5 in my personal experience anyway. So let's sweep that around a little bit and see what we come up with. Yeah, around 3.5 there. So I'd only really take maybe 1 or 2 dB away from that. The more that you cut out of it, the more that it just seems to make the entire tone fall apart. So let's have a listen to how that sounds with just 1 or 2 dB taken away. Seems like they're around the 2 dB mark, seems to be a good place. So you can hear the difference that makes. It just sits it back a little bit, just gives your ears a little bit of a sigh of relief. Now I don't really have too much of a problem with what's going on in the low mids of this one, so I'm not going to worry about cutting anything out of that at the moment. But I would probably give it maybe just a little bit of a top end boost around 8K. Just a little bit of extra air. And then finally there's the effects section, which has time-based effects, delay and reverb, but it also has modulation-based effects like chorus, flanger, phaser and tremolo, none of which I use for anything ever, really. So ordinarily, I probably wouldn't worry about using the onboard effects in any preset-based thing anyway, because I usually like to do my effects processing on a group bus at the end of it. So usually just all of the lead guitars together, or I'd have it on a send, just so that I've got a little bit more control over the overall tone. So that about covers all of it. So that's it for today. Hopefully this will help you achieve the results that you're after using this amazing preset pack. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all the other diatribe that YouTube people tell you to do. And please let me know in the comments what other content you'd like to see me do, because I'm planning on doing a lot more of it. Take care and stay safe.